Hello and welcome to the Two Step Podcast. I'm Bag.
And I'm Meg.
And today we are going to desperately try to not go over an hour on the length for our
40 to
sanity.
60 minutes. That's ideal.
That's a stretch goal, all right? One day we'll make it there.
It's a stretch goal. Give us enough money and maybe we'll lower the standards a little bit.
Yeah. So, actual topic today, what we're going to start out with is something called flow states. Now, there's probably a little bit of explanation I need to do about flow states, but think like, I think Mag said this a little bit ago when we were talking about it. Just think about like the term in the zone. Like think like that is sort of the idea of it.
Technical term is flow. Pretty crap technical term, but I guess it's better than in the zone, which basically sounds like you've just taken a bunch of fucking marijuana and gotten super high.
Well, one interesting thing about that is that what the flow state is actually
it's very similar.
There's five neurochemicals in your brain. I know some of them offhand. Serotonin, dopamine, endorphins, and then there's two more. It's like epinephrine or something like that. And one other thing.
Or some shit. Yeah, I know that one. And
the other one is like a really long, unpronounceable name that I don't know what it is.
The three that most people will be able to figure out on their own is serotonin, dopamine, whatever, and fucking endorphins. Serotonin and endorphins especially because endorphins you get just told about all the fucking time. This gives you endorphins. That gives you endorphins. If you jerk off, a bunch of endorphins are released into your brain. Fucking and serotonin is related to depression. Those who are depressed have little serotonin.
So if you've ever heard the term adrenaline junkie, that's kind of what we're talking about here. So the idea is that when you're in the flow state, all five of those neurochemicals are actively pumping into your brain. It's basically what a lot of people say the flow state is in your brain. Well, let me backtrack a little bit. So if you're not aware, your brain uses about 20% of your current resources. Like anything that you're doing at any given time, your brain's using about 20% of your energy just to function. And that's your conscious brain, meaning that when you're active and you're sitting there thinking, it's using 20% of your resources. So you heard it here first, stop thinking.
You're wasting precious brain activity by thinking. This is why the real smart people are dumb people. Yeah, I love the oxymoron of that statement also, yes.
So the idea behind the flow state is that you're turning off the conscious part of your brain and the subconscious part of your brain, which takes up way less energy, takes over.
Yeah, there are some some really good examples of this is again, literally explaining it to any creative person as being in the zone should pretty much answer all you need to know if you are a creative person at all. When you get in the zone, as it were, it essentially allows you basically go through all the motions without thinking. And you hyper-focus.
And it gives you it gives you much better performance. 500% better performance, and learning time is like halved.
Yeah, it's really, really common in video games. Because video games aren't particularly complicated. The rules get told to you at the start of the game. And the best players for video games essentially focus insanely on just the actual game and none of the internal mechanics of the game. They're just going through the motions. This can also be emulated using drugs. Such as Ritalin or fucking that other stuff that you guys take that isn't Ritalin.
Yeah, so the five neurochemicals that I was talking about earlier are the same chemicals that are released by amphetamines or Ritalin or whatever else you want to call it, whatever your drug of choice is when it comes to that.
For Ritalin being the I can't remember the American equivalent. It's the drug you take that people who have ADHD take to help them focus.
It's called the study drug.
It's the drug that professional gamers have started taking because it allows them to focus.
Adderall. It's called Adderall.
It allows them to focus intensely on one topic for a long period of time. It also tends to delay you it tends to delay sleep patterns. Like you just
Mm-hmm.
stay awake for fucking ever.
So so Adderall and amphetamines causes one of them.
Yep.
Another one is caused by is a chemical that's released when you smoke marijuana.
Yep.
There is another chemical that's released when you do cocaine.
Yep.
There's another one that's released similar to when you do heroin, and then
That's because
the last
a
one.
lot of things like
Hmm?
heroin and cocaine are fucking amphetamines or have them in them. So
Yeah,
right.
and then the last one is serotonin. Serotonin is one that's not altered by most drugs, particularly besides very specific ones. Mostly pharmaceutical drugs
I mean,
alter serotonin. Mm-hmm.
antidepressives try to alter it. I'm not gonna. It's debatable on how successful these are, but that's what they try to alter: serotonin levels. Marijuana is probably the most common that you'll find that can give you
Mm-hmm.
this. I mean, you only have to look back at all of the popular artists and musicians of like the 70s and 80s and see how many
Mm-hmm.
hard drugs they were doing, from weed, which isn't a hard drug, to crack, which is. They all took them, and they kind
Yeah.
of experienced that concept of being in the zone.
So the reason that we're talking about this is the other night I came across a video that was talking about the about what flow state does to you. So the original guy that was talking in the video was talking about how he I think he had Lyme disease is what he said.
Yes.
So he
So
yeah, Lyme disease. So he had Lyme disease, which is an autoimmune disease, and basically it just like slowly deteriorates, you
your
know,
body.
your
Yeah.
your your body. And I don't think there's a cure to Lyme disease, right?
No.
I think Lyme disease is the thing that people normally correlate with like getting bit by a tick.
All right. So the book in question is The Rise of Superman: Decoding the Science of Ultimate Human Performance by Stephen Kotler.
Mm-hmm.
There
And
was a talk
so,
about that book. Yeah, he had Lyme disease, and the story
mm-hmm,
goes. His story goes that he was barely able to function. He was basically the end state of Lyme disease where you're dead, right? You are essentially nothing. You can't walk. You can't do. You're basically active 5 to 10% of the time. The rest of the time, your body is just basically trying to stay alive in a almost comatose state. And one day his friend decided to come over and goes, "We're going to go surfing." So, of course, this is a bizarre concept to a dude who can barely walk across a room. How the fuck are you going to go surfing if you can't
mm-hmm,
walk to your kitchen and make you a meal? Either way, he ended up going surfing, and during this, he apparently experienced in the flow. And he spent the next few years trying to rationalize this because he considers himself, he's a science author. He writes science books. He considers himself a rational materialist. This is a dude
mm-hmm.
who shouldn't be having psychedelic hallucinatory experiences in the middle of the fucking ocean while surfing. Basically.
Yeah. So the whole idea of it was he used this as a tool to. He had an autoimmune disease, right? So he had autoimmune disease and he had Lyme disease. So there was no way for him to cure this Lyme disease
No,
that he had.
that's it.
And what he was doing is that when you enter the flow state, basically what happens is after you exit the flow state, your immune system resets to 0. Now, this is really good for him because his immune system was like at like negative 1,000, basically.
Yeah, it's already fucked.
So he was resetting his immune system. It was helping him slowly get his ability to function back. And he had he said he was at like 10% function at most on most days. So this state is something that's experienced very often by like when I said adrenaline junkies, basically adventure sports athletes. Like think people doing crazy shit. Like think of like if you ever see those Red Bull videos on Facebook where they're like doing like crazy like wingsuit flying and stuff like that. Those are the
it's not
things
even
I'm
just
talking
high
about.
danger sports, like people jumping out of a plane. Even runners have a term for being in the flow. Uh,
Yeah, it's called the runner's high.
yeah,
It is much less common for them though. Generally, it has to be you have to be like in a state of extreme concentration for those kind of things. I have experienced it a few times while biking.
I think the
Um,
easiest way for most people to relate to it is that because a lot of it is a lot of the experiences that you will feel during the flow is the same that you would feel during an adrenaline rush because the same
mhm.
chemicals are being released into your brain during an adrenaline rush. The difference is that the key here is that you're trying to activate this sensation without activating a flight or fight response.
Yeah, which is relatively difficult.
That's yeah. It's not a, so a lot of this will be, for instance, yeah. That's why high risk environments will clearly trigger this, but they're also high risk. That's kind of of course you're going to trigger an adrenaline response when you're jumping out of a fucking plane 20,000 feet in goddamn air. Yeah.
Another interesting thing about high risk though is that it's not just high physical risk. Like yes, obviously, you're going to like freak the fuck out if you're about to die,
Yeah.
but the human brain considers societal and emotional risk to be equal with physical risk. With risk, sorry.
Yes.
So, if you're ever in one of those situations where think about like someone calls you out on something and you have no time to respond. You just
You're being
have to
put on
take
the
care of
spot.
something. Yeah, like if you're put on the spot or if say it's one of those situations where like you know how you get your best work done when you're forced to do it? That's the idea.
Yes. So
It's a very similar feeling.
yeah, so procrastination, or if you're in, so if you procrastinate so much now that you only have one day to do something, oh,
Hmm.
congratulations. Your body, your brain is now going to work even harder to try and accomplish this task because you have to, and your brain knows you have to. An alternative thing for being put on the spot is like if you're in an interview and
Hmm.
the employer asks you a question that you didn't prepare for. And now you have to give them an answer because you don't really have a choice. You're not just going, I'm going to walk out now. Oh shit, you gave me a tough question. Fuck, I'm just going to walk out now.
Yeah,
See you later.
as a piece of advice, as someone who has performed quite a few interviews, like actually interviewed people, if that does happen to you, and it's a question that you're not ready for, you can literally tell the interviewer, give me a moment to think about it. And that is more than acceptable.
Yeah, I think people probably forget that yes, a person on the other side of the table is obviously going to ask you questions because they want to know if you're good, if you're right for the job. But they're also a person. They're not a fucking
Yeah.
robot.
It's not like they're just some unthinking, unfeeling robot on the other side of the chair that's just destined to try to not give you this job.
Yeah, because the reality is that it doesn't matter how perfect you are for the job or not. Because if they don't like you, you're not going to get the job anyway.
Yeah.
That
Unfortunately,
matters.
that's kind of how it goes.
Yeah, like that matters as well. Uh, yeah, so personally, I've experienced this a lot in art, where you art really benefits from not focus from. So this is a lot of hyper focus, but this is subconscious. A lot of this is subconscious, and art
Hmm.
and design in general benefits greatly from not focusing on anything. So just doing the work. Drawing a picture, for instance, is best done, at least in my experience, if you don't think about the actual picture. You don't think about the picture. You don't think about how you're supposed to draw the picture. You just do it, right? You let your hands and your fingers do the talking here.
And unfortunately for me, I don't get flow states from that. The only time I get flow states are from like the adrenaline junkie type thing.
Yeah,
Everybody's different. There's like a bunch of different like types of flow states that you can get. There's the adrenaline junkie. There's the artist type one where you're just like in the pocket or like in the endless laugh box, whatever you want to call it for your different profession. There's one that you get from meditating,
yes.
and what's the last one?
The theory goes The theory states that there are three conditions that you must achieve to meet a flow state. First is that you have to be doing an activity with a clear goal,
Mm-hmm.
which generally means things like if you're drawing a picture or you're playing a game or you're trying to write a song, those are the goals. This adds direction, then the task needs direction. Second one is that the task at hand must have some sort of clear and immediate feedback. Again, if you're drawing a picture, there's obviously immediate feedback because you're going to see it. And the third task, which is probably the most difficult, is that you must have a good balance between the perceived challenges of the task at hand and your own perceived skills. So you must have confidence in your ability to be able to complete the task at hand to properly achieve a flow state.
Yeah, it's a lot of it's a lot of experience, a lot of knowing what you're already doing, knowing like how to do it, and understanding that you are doing it well. Because as soon as you start breaking into that, like, oh, I don't know if I'm actually going to be able to do this, you're on the conscious side of your brain, and it completely kills it.
Completely. And the thing about it is, it's not so much a confidence. It's not about you going, I can do this. It's about you saying, it's about you not saying that you can't do it. Because a lot of this is subconscious. It's not about, so subconsciously you need to know that you can do it. You don't have to consciously remind yourself and think about positive reinforcement. It's just about not telling yourself, it's just not about having negative reinforcement and saying you can't do something and focusing on that.
Yeah, and like I was saying before, I'm unfortunately on like the adrenaline junkie side. Like I don't really get the flow state from like intensely focusing on something or anything like that.
Yeah,
Mine all comes from I get it a lot while biking. I do long distance biking. Like the longest that I've ever gone was like 50, 60 miles, something like that, in one sitting. And honestly, it doesn't really happen on the long bike treks. It happens in like moments of where I'm like, I want to push really hard for a bit, for like 10, 15 minutes. That's when it happens.
Yeah, that's when you get into this hyper-focus state.
Yeah, it doesn't. And also I get it when I do a lot of trail running. There's not a lot of trails near me, but there are a few good ones.
Yeah.
And during trail running, you're in a pretty varied environment. There's a lot of different changing colors and scenery and all that kind of stuff. And it's rather dangerous because if basically in the trails that I run, if you trip, you're going to go down like a 10 to 15 foot ravine into water with alligators in it. So a little bit dangerous.
Yeah.
And so I run that at probably faster than I should. And a lot of the times when I'm doing that is when I really hit that like the flow state, basically, when I feel like nothing, basically. You really don't feel like anything. It's hard to describe when it's happening. If you've ever had one of those moments where it's like you start doing something and all of a sudden it's like 6 hours later and you're like, oh shit, what just happened? That's the flow state.
For the average person that is intended to be watching this video, that's going to be gamer. It's going to be gamer. And it's really, it's pretty well established in gaming, just not necessarily called. I mean, again, it's called being in the zone for gaming, when you become so sidetracked that you ignore all outside stimulants and you become hyper-focused on the game at hand. Personally, I don't get this for competitive games. I get it for single-player games, so games like Path of Exile. Because competitive games are hard. Unless you're in a 1v1 competitive game, it's really difficult because if you want to be in the zone in a game like League of Legends, everybody else has to be in the zone as well. Because if
there's a lot of communication going on in those kind of games, so it's kind of hard to go into that like pure flow state, basically.
Yeah, because and even if it's like you got to all be on the same page, and the moment that somebody's not on the same page, it breaks. It just completely breaks your concentration. I mean,
go ahead.
I think the easiest way to describe this is a sense of hyper concentration, where you basically focus on one thing that's in front of you, the goal that's in front of you, and ignore everything else that's happening. And you're not worried about any of you're not worried about how the activity you're doing in front of you works, because you're not thinking about that, at least consciously. You're thinking about it subconsciously. So you become so entranced. And this is why they'd say it works with meditation as well, because meditation is literally putting yourself into a trance-like state. So there's so much to say about it for me. because
Yeah,
it's really difficult to force yourself into this state for a lot of people.
yeah, it's one of those what I was saying before about like the four different types. You can force it with meditation. It's
Yeah.
actually pretty common for like martial artists and things like that. Pretty much anytime you see someone on a stage like a comedian, a martial artist in a fight, a singer, any kind of comedian, musician, any of that. Most of the time, when you see them on that stage and they're really killing it, they're in that flow state. And the reason that I kind of wanted to talk about that, it just seemed like a cool topic, but it also kind of brings up the question about like human consciousness and how little we actually know about it. Because
Oh well, I mean,
the the original idea with the flow state, which was wrong, and what they thought was that the you probably have heard that thing where it says like the human brain only uses ten
yeah,
percent of its energy at any one
it was a
time.
lot of
Complete
bullshit.
bullshit. Um,
I really don't know why that got. The problem isn't that your brain uses 10% of it. The problem people say it's because the misconception is that you're using your entire brain at once, which
mhm.
isn't true. So you might only use 10% of a part of your brain at any given time, but you're not using 10% of your entire fucking brain all the time. It's just that because not every activity requires every. Basically, people who don't understand how a brain works making very simplified statements to people to, I guess, to try and explain how a brain works. I don't know the context of that quote. I don't think anybody knows the context of that quote anymore. It's
Yeah,
just
probably
lost.
not. But the idea of the flow state is that it's the opposite of what you would think. During the flow state, more of your brain is actually shut off than is on. It's just completely relying on instinct.
You're basically, yes, because you're diverting all of those erroneous resources into this one section.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I don't, yeah. I mean, speaking of there's so much we don't know about the consciousness, though. I mean, dreams are a good one. I was interested when I was younger. I was interested in lucid dreaming.
Yeah, I've looked into it a bit, but
Lucid dreaming is
I
great.
I was always worried about sleep paralysis because that's a common side effect of lucid dreaming. And
I've not heard of that.
sleep paralysis is where your mind is awake but your body is not.
I know I have heard of that. Yes. Yeah. Just not
But yeah, sleep paralysis where you like see fucking ghosts and shit and they like torment you while you're sitting there and all that you can do is move your eyes.
So, to put
It's a little terrifying.
another one that's questionable, because this isn't. The problem with the consciousness in the brain is that not a lot of this is scientific at all. Things like
Mm-hmm.
hallucinations are fucked. You can say a hallucination, and we can say it's a hallucination and it's your brain making imagery, but that doesn't really mean anything. Um, I know people who've had experiences with, for instance, what's the term for it? Spirit walking,
Mm-hmm.
which is where you apparently leave your body during a sleep-like state and you travel. Uh, but that essentially brings in the concept of, as you call it, sleep paralysis, where you are now outside
Mm-hmm.
of your body and are unable to re-enter it as such. This gets people really paranoid, but as far as I'm concerned, there's no scientific basis for this, so I just consider it a dream state that they have no control over it because they don't have it. So they're aware that it's a dream state, but they're not.
Mm-hmm.
They're not. So they're aware that this is a state outside of being awake, but they're not. They're not considering the possibility that this is a dream and they could control it like a lucid dream.
Yeah, so it's kind of just like your brain is basically confusing itself at any
Yes,
given point.
I don't, because the whole, yeah, and things like leaving your spirit, leaving your body, and going on fucking
Mm-hmm.
spirit journeys. This is a really old thing. People have talked about this for centuries. People have been doing this. It's a very tribal thing, but I don't think it's anything more than a dream concept that you're confusing as something else while you're awake. Because while you're
Yeah,
dreaming, I don't know if you've ever had a lucid dream. Uh, you kind of know when you're dreaming. It's kind of obvious.
yeah. The way it works is what's the name of the drug? DMT.
Yep.
Um, it's called the dream drug or
Yep.
God drug, whatever the fuck you want to call it. And The idea is that when you are sleeping, your body makes a certain amount, and this is just person to person. There's no like specific amount that everyone
I
makes.
mean, that's the same with any drug too. So
Yeah. It person to person, it affects you differently. And the idea is that when you're sleeping, your body makes a certain amount of this drug. Normally, most of the time, anybody that makes a ton of the drug has a hard time remembering their dreams. And people that make a small amount of the drug have a much easier time remembering their dreams.
which means
But what happens when you're, yeah. So what happens to a lot of people when they're sleepwalking is that during that time, they're suffering from that memory loss of not being able to normally remember their dreams because they have so much of it going on, but their body is tricked into actually being awake. So the idea is they never have any recollection of it ever happening, but they still, while they are doing it, are fully aware.
Yeah. This is the key point about lucid dreaming too. Lucid dreaming is actually not really that hard to achieve. It only requires two things of you. Really, only two things. The first is that before you go to bed, you need to constantly, before you go to sleep, while you're in bed, and you can use a recording for this, which I did, so much easier. You have a recording that tells you that you will remember your dreams, and you will wake up and you will write them down. And you just kind of keep repeating that to yourself, either manually or for a recording, doesn't really matter, but you just keep repeating that to yourself, because eventually, your brain gets into a your brain gets into a area where it's just like, okay, I know I've got to wake up now. I've had a fucking dream, so I've got to wake up, I've got to write it down. And the key part of it is having a dream diary. You have to write it down. Because the reality is that when you wake up after a dream, and again, it's different for everybody, but as somebody who has experienced this, when you wake up after a dream or after a situation where you think you've been dreaming and you've had something like that happen, you're not in the best state of fucking mind. You were just in the middle of fucking deep sleep. Now you've just had that interrupted, and you're now telling yourself, I'm gonna write this fucking shit down. Alright? It isn't gonna be accurate. It's not gonna be in depth. Because it doesn't matter though. It doesn't matter because the entire purpose is to just remember something for the next day. So you can go back and look at that diary and you remember it.
For me, there's only a very short period of time after I'm done dreaming where I can actually remember anything about my dream. It's like 5 minutes. If I go past 5 minutes, I very rarely remember almost anything. And it's normally like circumstantial when I remember things. It's like something will happen and it'll just pop up.
It's not even just dreams. People will get ideas for anything. And these ideas can be great, they can be crap, whatever. But if you don't write them down, they're useless because you'll forget them. Your mind... despite the whole theories where we can store like 2.5 petabytes of data in our brain, the mind is not that great. It overrides data instantly because it doesn't care. Unless there's a massive connection of a memory that you want to keep. Basically, unless there's this memory stimulates your brain, right? Like massively, it's not going to remember. Your brain doesn't give a fuck. It'll just forget it, right? Like I forget what I have for breakfast. Why? Because who gives a fuck? I don't care. I don't need to remember that. It doesn't mean anything. I remember that I had breakfast because that's important. Remembering that what I ate or is not, but remembering that I ate is. So that's the first step of dreaming. And there's an argument to be made. How do you know that you dreamt this? How do you know that this even happened in the next morning? How do you know that happened? And to me, I don't think that's relevant. It's a fucking dream. It doesn't actually happen anyways. It exists. It doesn't exist outside of your subconscious. So realistically, it's an imaginary thought anyways. And frankly, the only reason I was doing it is because it's a great source of inspiration. And that, to me, that's all it is. But lucid dreaming comes into the fact where you're still technically sleeping and you know you're dreaming. And so... when you get into a state where dreams tend to follow patterns, and when you get into a state where you have now confidently writing down waking up after a dream and writing it down, eventually you should form a pattern where you will be able to figure out while you're sleeping or while you're experiencing the dream, this is a dream. I know this is a dream, now you can do whatever the fuck you want in it. But there's no scientific proof of this. I mean, it depends. There's just a lot of fucking people, anecdotal experience of people saying they've done it. And I'm just another person telling you that it's possible.
It's actually kind of funny how much of a lot of studies are actually just anecdotal experience. Like weightlifting for the longest time was almost exclusively anecdotal experience. But on a point that you were talking about earlier, when you're talking about how the memories don't move into long-term storage, just as kind of a backtracking a little bit to the flow state thing.
Yeah.
When I was talking about how flow state makes it so that you learn 50% faster, like the time it takes to learn a expertise type skill, like something that's not easy, is reduced by 50%, is because when you're in the flow state, you are able to turn short-term memories into long-term memories 50% faster is the idea. Because if you've ever heard the term muscle memory, there's actually two types of muscle memory. The first one is the one that most people are familiar with, where it's like you already know and your body will respond to that stimulus by itself.
Yeah.
Like if you've rode a bike, you know what muscle memory is, because as the bike turns and twists a certain way, your body will automatically respond. The other kind of muscle memory is much less common and less relevant to this conversation, but I'll at least talk about it. The other type of muscle memory is that your muscles remember how to build themselves. So if you've ever
it's least relevant to this conversation, but relevant to weightlifting.
So if you've seen Arnold Schwarzenegger anytime recently, he's getting ripped again. Like, he's getting fucking huge again. And the reason that he's able to do this so easily is because of muscle memory. His body has already made all of those gains. All of that muscle has been made before, and his body knows how to do it. So he doesn't actually have to try that hard to get back to where he was at. And that goes for anything. It happened to me right now as well, because I'm getting back into weightlifting. The start to where you were previously at will take, like, I don't know, a couple months at most, a lot of the time. Maybe a year, and then from then on it slows down. But
there's a lot of
not really.
There's
relevant.
a lot of diminishing returns when it comes to muscle building, and it's different for everybody.
But yeah, that's the idea of muscle memory. So when you're able to move that knowledge into long-term storage, your body can use it subconsciously, is the idea.
Yeah, but your brain doesn't do that very well, which is why they tell you to do the same thing over and over and over again. That's why that's common adage. You got to practice. You got to do this over and over and again, because half of that is just telling your brain, this is what needs to be done. This is how we're gonna do it. Fucking remember it, asshole.
This is important. Please fucking remember to do this thing every single time, and we still fail every time.
That's why we have to-do lists. That's why we have giant pieces of paper that we write on, telling them, got to fucking do this piece of shit that I don't really care about, but it's kind of important.
Yeah, kind of like recording podcast episodes and making sure they get online.
I'm going to delay it by 2 weeks. It's fine. What's wrong with delaying it? Look, it's fine. I'll procrastinate, and then when I got to do it, I got to do it in like...
You'll be in that flow state.
I'll be in the flow!
Yeah, that's how it goes.
Gonna be in the fucking zone.
There's just so many like things happening recently that it's hard to like. You know how you go through those periods where it's like you're really motivated to do your work and do everything that you're supposed to, and you have like limitless amounts of just like pure motivation.
Yeah.
And then like, it's like, hey, like Chris Wilson at Grinding Your Games, like, hey, this cool new expansion league is coming up for your favorite game. You should probably come and play it a little bit and stop doing anything that you're doing.
It's not even like
That's what I want to do right now. It's even calling me right now.
No, I'm literally just about to stream you playing the game right before you fucking go, hey, dude, let's do the podcast. Like, son of a bitch.
But that's how it goes, right?
Yeah.
Your brain is like, it's funny because like naturally we're creatures that are very thirsty for knowledge. Like that's the reason why nowadays people of basically any age at this point, I don't really think it's an age thing anymore. Basically anybody that's been alive and in society for the last 15 years is information addicted, because our brains are naturally information addicted. That's just how it goes.
But now that it's even easier to get that high, you just go, fuck, I need to know this. Go on Wikipedia,
So if you're older than like 20, like if you're like 25 or older at this point,
Oh, you're
you
old.
remember a time where you were self-conscious, you were a person, like you weren't like 4 or 5, right? You were like 10 or 12 or even a teenager. You remember a time where it wasn't easy to just go and get information. Like it wasn't just like you could be like nowadays it's a foreign
Oh,
concept to a lot of people to think
so
that they can't just figure something out like that by looking it up online.
obviously, the older you get, the more true this is. But even when as somebody who grew up in the 90s, even like the internet was a thing in the 90s. Wasn't a
Mhm.
very big thing though. It wasn't a commercial thing. That is to say that if you wanted to have the internet, it was either going to be very fucking slow or very fucking expensive. As
Yeah, and there
somebody
was
who,
basically no in between.
yeah, there was no in between. And as a kid growing up, I was a PC gamer as a kid, but we always had shit PC. So the PC games that I played, even into the early 2000s, were basically the same games that I'd played in the 90s, because that's all I could play. Which also means that I couldn't do a hell of a lot on the fucking internet. It's kind of really difficult when your job, when apparently you decide, oh, I want to learn fucking web design. You know, that thing that requires a good connection for people to use.
Yeah, I seem to remember this story when you're talking about like the price of internet back then. I seem to remember this story of Joe Rogan saying he was spending like $1,000 a month on a T3 connection back in the day so he could play fucking Quake.
Yeah.
Dude, a T3 connection's not even actually that good in nowadays standards, and this was like what is
To
like
put it in
T?
perspective, yeah, if you put it in perspective, right, when I was a kid growing up, they had cable connections. Cable. And you think, and if I tell you what cable is now, people will think really fast internet. But that's not what cable was at the time. The
Mm-hmm.
maximum speed for cable, right, was like 1 megabit download. I'm not talking 1 megabyte per second. I'm talking 1 megabit. So you take that and you fucking divide it by 8. That's the download
Mm-hmm.
speed you get. Now, that's fucking slow. But also considering that 56K connection was also in bit. Nobody ever got 56 kilobytes a second download speed, because we'd be fucking creaming our goddamn assholes if we got that much fucking download speed. All right, porn wouldn't have taken like 5 minutes an image to fucking download. It would have been fucking great.
I'm looking at T3 speeds right now, and
Jesus Christ, man.
T3. So this is something that he paid $1,000 a month for. $1,000 a month in like the 2000s, right?
Yeah, really early 2000s.
Yeah. $1,000 a month only got you about 40 megabits per second. $1,000. Right now, that would cost like 80, 90?
A month?
Yeah.
God, you gotta love this. You gotta love the discrepancy, because New Zealand internet is really good. I'd argue that New Zealand internet is better than American internet. Generally speaking.
I don't know if that like was
certain,
on the recording. One second here. I don't know if that was on the recording, but you might have just seen my lights flicker. So my power might go out actually.
All right, well, we're almost nearing that time anyways, but
yeah, but anyways, let's
the
continue.
difference with the internet, it's so annoying when I hear people going like in Europe going, "Oh man, I get like a fucking 150 megabit connection for like $20 a month." And I'm sitting here going, "Fuck you. I don't get that. Mine costs 4 times that." I mean, I guess it's like maybe like 3 times that technically because of conversion rates, but it's still not that cheap. And that includes the phone line. And I'm paying I'm paying like 100 a month New Zealand dollars, 110 maybe for my internet. And it's good internet, but it's fucking, then you get some little bastard in fucking Finland or Sweden going, I pay only
like, hey, I got gigabit internet and I pay like a dime a day or something like that. It's like, okay, man.
I'll just move to South Korea. It's fine. Get the best internet in the fucking world.
Yeah, the only problem with South Korea is that if you're in South Korea, that's probably the issue.
As a white person living in South Korea, it's not that bad. You know.
Yeah, probably, because I know that in South Korea,
I've had friends who lived in South Korea. It's not that bad, but they always wanted to go back to America.
Yeah, because it's like I know in I know in a lot of Asian countries like China, South Korea, Japan, like literally, there's companies that if you're like a white dude, they will just hire you to come with them on their business meetings and just sit there and nod at shit just so it makes them look better. Like
Yeah.
that's insane
Dude,
to
I'll
me.
be honest. I'll be fucking honest. I will gladly accept money to be a fucking nodding yes man at a fucking business meeting for 8 hours a day. I'll do that.
Hell yeah.
I don't care. There's not a. I mean, because of all the Asian countries that I'd ever want to live in, there's only really three. There's Japan, South Korea, and Singapore. And the rest
I wouldn't want to live in Japan.
Japan,
Maybe in 20 years, but not today.
It's better than the alternatives.
Yeah, probably.
Doesn't matter. I'm moving to the fucking Netherlands, and I'm gonna have cheap internet. And if I ever get
all right, so in the interest of saving our sanity, I think we will actually call it there.
Oh yeah, 40 minutes in.
That's probably a good time to call it. So
Yeah.
as per usual, thank you for listening and now watching, since you can see our wonderful faces on your screen. If you happen to like watching,
Yeah, for whatever reason.
and you guys tell me in the comments if you saw my lights actually flash. Because
Yeah,
I'm not sure. Maybe I was just having an aneurysm or something.
That was like 5 minutes ago. Maybe I'll check it out when I'm editing this.
Yeah, it was something like that. See if my lights actually flash, because that'd be interesting to make sure that I'm not mentally deficient. Well, I am. So
but don't but for other reasons. Don't forget to push that like and subscribe button. Two important buttons.
Yeah, unfortunately, with well, that's if YouTube doesn't take away the last bastion of hope for anybody that's trying to actually get people to see their videos. They might just make it, oh, we're gonna optimize your subscriber page.
Yeah,
there. We don't want people to see.
Yeah, every few months
videos.
I get a message, from YouTube going, we've changed the way that your channel works. And I was like,
we have significantly worsened the way that our service works. But yeah, anyways, thanks for listening, guys. Have a good one.
Cheers.